This road right here completely blocked. You can see some power lines down. I'm having to be extra careful as I'm backing up here just to make sure I'm not stepping on any of the lines. Somebody from Georgia Power was just out here and said this line is still hot. This is what's left behind from last night. You can see where folks were doing burnouts here before law enforcement moved in at around 8 and ended the street racing event that many know as Sunday Fun Day. A courtroom in absolute shock. Count by count, you could hear gasp as Ryan Duke was found not guilty on all charges except concealing the death of Tara Grinstead. Meanwhile, Ryan Duke gave a sigh of relief as he hugged his defense attorneys. Governor Brian Kemp stepped off the stage a little over an hour ago, but throughout the evening, you could still feel that energy and excitement. A crowd chanting 4 more years as Governor Brian Kemp celebrated a victory, a landslide win, making him the Republican nominee for governor. A win that was expected going into tonight as he was leading all of the major polls. Good evening, Frank. Shortly after that February 25th press conference, we filed an open records request on the DA's files on those cases. Under state law, the public has the right to know the outcome of these criminal cases. And over a month later, the district attorney's office still has not provided us those records. After weeks of back and forth, and only after our station lawyers had to get involved, the DA's office said they would get us those records. But because they didn't keep a list of those 63 inmates, it would cost us $2,922. Because we believe the public has the right to know how the DA's office is handling criminal justice in Bibb County, we paid $1,500 to get the work started. Well, we got back 8 of the 63 files, only 28 pages. All were petitions to revoke probation, all for felony charges. But none of those records explained why the DA's office chose these specific cases for disposition. So we asked the DA's office on camera. This is the only piece of paper that you guys ever dealt with in this whole inmate's case file?
Not their original case, obviously, but in their probation revocation, it may have been the only piece of paper.
This was a really huge loss for Stacey Abrams. She trails Governor Brian Kemp by nearly 300,000 votes. That's 6 times her losing margin in 2018. We're going to look over now to Hancock County. She had 68% last night, but compare that to 2018, 75%. Those percentage points, those votes add up, and you can see that trend across the state, even in the metro Atlanta area. Abrams lost ground last night, even in areas that she won, and an example of that is in Baldwin County. You can see the county flipped. Back in 2018, Abrams won it with 50%. But last night, 53.3% of the vote went to Brian Kemp. This really shows that blue sweep we saw in 2020 wasn't in the state this year. And Kemp's record, his status as an incumbent, the political climate, and the economy all seemed to give him an advantage last night.
Welcome back. When you get in a car wreck, you expect first responders to be able to come to your rescue quickly. But what if they can't get to you? To give you life-saving medical attention without a 30-minute detour. Well, that's what happened in July of 2021 in Juliet because a railroad crossing was blocked by a stopped train.
Now, it's the same crossing that caught the eye of Senator John Ossoff in an inquiry to the Federal Railroad Administration. Ashlyn Webb takes a closer look at the track that's gone from a headache to a public safety problem for folks in Juliet. And tonight's 13 investigates.
286 Montana.
10:30 on the morning of July 30th, 2021. Monroe County deputies respond to an accident on Juliet Road. According to dispatch records, a 73-year-old woman was unconscious after another driver who was under the influence of meth hit her car near the railroad tracks.
So she wasn't moving at the time.
But first responders couldn't get to the scene. A Norfolk Southern train blocked the crossing.
We couldn't get over there. We constantly called Norfolk Southern, asked them to move the train. They gave excuses why they couldn't move the train.
Sheriff Brad Freeman says deputies would have to take a 35-minute detour.
Well, that's a long time. Evidence can be destroyed. Suspects can disappear. And as far on the EMS side, you're looking at, they call it the golden hour, I believe, when you can possibly get a trauma patient to the hospital and possibly save their life. Well, it's taking you 35 minutes. To get to the scene, it can be bad.
While deputies tried to cross the tracks, their office asked neighboring Jones County to respond. But it would take them 30 minutes to get there too. So first responders slid the 73-year-old woman under a train car on a gurney so she could get medical help.
It's scary and disturbing
Freeman says more life-threatening emergencies like this could happen again. Some Joliet residents, like Andrea Goolsby, say that's their biggest fear.
The fact that I have a child, he and myself both spend so much time on the river. If something were to happen across those tracks, who's going to get to us to help us? It's a safety issue. There are people that live on the other side of the tracks that are medically fragile, some terminally ill, and having to go 20 miles out of their way could be life or death.
The Federal Railroad Administration says since June 2020, they've received at least 92 reports of the Joliet Road being blocked. But people in Joliet say they don't report most of those cases to the feds. They say the crossing gets blocked weekly, sometimes daily, for up to 6 hours. Our crew was there when it was blocked on Labor Day.
Move the train!
Just fix it.
But it's not illegal for a train to block a crossing, even for hours. The Federal Railroad Administration says there's no federal laws against it, and there's no Georgia law. States like Illinois, Iowa, and Washington State all have laws banning trains from blocking crossings for more than 10 minutes. And other states like Alabama are considering legislation. Freeman says with safety concerns mounting, they've reached out to Norfolk Southern asking them to fix the problem.
Basically, they were less than polite, basically informed me that there was nothing I could do and basically nothing they would do about it.
Do you feel like you're being railroaded? Do you feel like the city of Joliet is being railroaded in this?
I feel like that the railroad just has an I don't care attitude. It's like, obviously the railroad is a corporation. You can't vote for them. You can't boot them out of office, and they're going to do what they want to do and basically dare you to do anything to them.
Norfolk Southern responded and said they could not move the train on July 30th, 2021 because the train broke down and had to be repaired. But that's not always the case when this crossing is blocked. The railroad says that a train has to stop at a siding here when crews have to take mandated rest times. But they say they're stopping even more nowadays due to staffing problems within the last year. They say they're working to hire more. For 13 Investigates, I'm Ashlyn Webb.
A Macon chiropractor faces a charge of sexual battery again. This time, Dr. Bailey Phillips is accused of touching a patient. They say he had made advances at her, looked down her sweatpants, and touched her tailbone.
According to the Bibb County Sheriff's Office, Bailey Phillips was arrested for felony sexual battery on May 11th. He was released the same day on a $10,000 bond. But as Ashlyn Webb reports, 15 years ago, 3 of his own employees came forward saying they were being sexually harassed and assaulted.
This is just the case file from 2007. In this file, 3 women who were all employed by Dr. Phillips at the time tell Macon police what they say happened. They describe a work environment where they were repeatedly sexually harassed and preyed on. Tonight, we tell their stories. The women say the harassment began in February 2007. Dr. Bailey Phillips was their boss. They all worked at Phillips' Vineville Avenue practice. The first woman says Phillips grinded against her pants. She says he later exposed himself while she and a patient were in his office in September. Then another woman said he exposed himself to her in the office the same month. And a third woman told police he grabbed her breast in October 2007. They told police they were scared to come forward because they feared losing their jobs, and Phillips told each not to tell anyone. One woman told an investigator, "I feel powerless, afraid, untrusting, and insecure. I'm embarrassed and I'm hurt. I don't want to tell my husband because I'm ashamed of what he would think of me, and I feel nervous around people I don't even know." Another woman saying, "I was a single mom who needed a job. I could not just quit and not have any money. I was afraid." The same woman went on to say he needs to do jail time so that he can't do this to anybody else. His license needs to be gone and he needs mental help. The Bibb County Sheriff's Office tells 13 WMAZ Phillips was arrested in October 2007 for those incidents, resulting in 3 counts of sexual battery and 2 counts of indecent exposure. Records show Phillips went to court in June 2008. A judge dismissed 2 counts of sexual battery and 1 count of indecent exposure. Phillips pleaded no contest to the remaining charges. He was sentenced to 2 years probation. Now the question that still remains, why was Dr. Phillips able to keep his license and keep working as a chiropractor here in Macon? His license was renewed in 2011 by the Georgia Board of Chiropractor Examiners after those first alleged incidents. That board is under the Secretary of State's office. Their website says they protect, promote, and preserve the public health, safety, and welfare of the citizens of Georgia. But we asked Friday morning why Dr. Phillips was still able to hold that license. They told us they wouldn't be able to give us an answer until Tuesday due to the long Memorial Day weekend. Reporting in Macon, Ashlyn Webb, 13 WMAZ News.
Phillips attorney Scott Huggins emailed us this afternoon to say he had no comment, except to say his client is presumed to be not guilty and he's confident a jury will find that.
Who's more accurate at predicting elections? Would you put your money on professional pollsters or online gamblers?
Well, recent studies, including one from the University of North Carolina, found folks making bets tend to be more accurate. And online bettors, they're throwing stacks of money at Georgia's election, particularly on who will win Georgia's Senate seat.
Ashlyn Webb takes a closer look at the growing industry around political betting. She talked to top traders and the folks behind one of the top political betting sites.
Tens of thousands of Americans are putting money where their mouth is, betting thousands on who will win elections.
But I deposit, I think, maybe $5,000. Profits are, I think, somewhere around 450K.
To have that kind of return, I mean, that's insane.
It's the kind of thing where if you're into this stuff and you're willing to follow the news and you have a decent head for numbers, you can get good at it.
Most political bettors do this as a side gig, but for Jason Pipkin, he says he's gambling full-time after leaving his job in neuroscience research. And he says he's making bets in Georgia.
Right now, I'm betting on Herschel Walker, but that's probably going to change. Could change tomorrow, could change later.
He uses one of the most popular sites to trade on here in the U.S., Predictit.org. Ethan Rosen is the site's assistant director.
It's grown enormously in popularity.
Rosen says folks are betting heavily on Georgia's races, like the governor's race, where over 400,000 shares have been traded, with Governor Brian Kemp holding a hefty lead over Democrat Stacey Abrams. And even more are betting it all on Georgia's Senate race, over 1.2 million shares traded on who will win. Democrat incumbent Senator Raphael Warnock or Republican Herschel Walker.
These are two of the more interesting races I've seen, in part because predicted traders think that there's going to be a high amount of ticket splitting, meaning people who vote for both Kemp and Warnock.
But how does it work? Well, here's the deal. Political betting runs on a prediction market. Cost of a single share changes constantly with the market by how folks are betting.
It's a market that takes in people's perceptions of the races and comes out with a price that corresponds to probability.
For example, when Pipkin and I talked, more were betting on Senator Warnock winning, with a single share in his favor costing 64 cents.
That means if you want to bet on him to win, you would pay 64 cents per share. So if you come in with 64 cents, you get one share. If he wins, that share is worth $1. If he loses, it's worth nothing. And in between now and that happening, winning or losing, you can sell that trade for a small profit or a small loss.
But especially in races like this, Pipkin and Rosen say bettors have to play their cards right by doing the research and reacting quickly to headlines. For instance, the market for Georgia's Senate race changed within hours after the report that Herschel Walker allegedly paid for his then-girlfriend's abortion.
Predicted moved 10 cents that night.
And then when his son Christian started tweeting about it, it really moved. So it went all the way to 65-35.
Because as the information was coming in, people were making predictions on how it would impact the race in the future.
That's in part why several studies, including from the University of Iowa and University of North Carolina, have concluded that prediction markets for elections are often more accurate than polling.
So when people have skin in the game, they tend to do more research and to make more reasoned opinions.
When you have money on the line, it really sobers you up and forces you to assess the situation as rationally and as clearly as you can.
So what do you think now? Will you bet on the ballot this November? For 13 WMAZ, I'm Ashlyn Webb.
Political betting has been outlawed in the U.S. However, it's not illegal for folks to use predicted.org.
The site secured a no-action letter from the Division of Market Oversight of the Commodity Futures Trading Commission back in 2014. However, that agency revoked the letter in August of this year, meaning Predicted could be forced to shut down by February of 2023.
Do you think that the outcome on July 15th would have been different if a mental health provider was there along with police?
Yes. I think so. Yes. I think so.
That's what the parents of Brianna Greer had to say when Ashlyn Webb interviewed them in August. In July, their daughter's death made national news when body camera video showed deputies responding to Greer's schizophrenic episode. The Georgia Bureau of Investigation says the 28-year-old suffered deadly head injuries when she fell out of a deputy's cruiser. The month she died, Georgia's co-responder law took effect, encouraging law enforcement agencies to create teams of mental health counselors and officers. But as Ashlyn Webb reports in tonight's 13 Investigates, 6 months later, not a single Central Georgia county has set up one of these teams.
Yes, Lori, we checked with every law enforcement agency in Central Georgia. Most said they're in contact with the State Department of Behavioral Health Community Service Boards to have a mental health clinician on call. But that clinician would have to cover more than one county. However, Bibb County says they plan to launch a program early next year where a mental health clinician would respond to scenes as needed. And Washington County says they've applied for a grant to create a task force. With that, we look to some agencies beyond Central Georgia that already have established teams to see what's working and what's not. In tonight's 13 Investigates. A situation police often see, a person experiencing a psychiatric episode. This man told police the government was out to get him, and he was trying to escape off of a roof. Instead of just police swarming the man, a mental health clinician was by his side. That's Pejma Devi next to the translator. He's part of Gwinnett County Police Department's co-responder team, along with Corporal Tracy Reed. And on this day in February, they spent hours talking the man down off the roof.
You call 911 because if something bad is happening. It's not because you want to celebrate your birthday. So already you have a bad idea, a bad thought, and then the police show up in their police cars, lights. You're thinking, I'm going to jail or somebody's in trouble. I think for us, it's just being a friend. Just having that human connection, trying to relate to the person.
The outcome, the man didn't go to jail as he feared. Instead, the team connected the man to mental health services. That's what's happened in half of the Gwinnett team's over 2,000 calls since it's launched in July 2021.
Of all the calls that we have responded to, less than 2% have resulted in somebody going to jail.
Madevi and Reed followed the lead from the first team in the state, Athens-Clarke County. Sergeant Robbie Cochran has built his team from the ground up over the last 6 years while pioneering the idea across the state, getting people the mental health treatment they need while getting them out of jail.
It's been 6 years since I made an arrest.
And why is that?
It's hard to build trust in the community if they're in fear that you're going to arrest them every time you see them. Has a crime been committed? Probably so, maybe, but that's not what I'm here for. If the officers wanted to arrest you, they would have arrested you before they called me.
It's saving people from jail time, and it's also saving police departments manpower, the agencies say. Even more of a reason why Gwinnett County expanded their program this year from 1 unit to 6 to cover every patrol precinct.
And what we were finding was that when officers responded to these calls, they were getting stuck because they weren't familiar with the resources. They didn't know where to send people for help, and the community didn't know where to go for help. Now we have that resource because we're bringing it with us in the car.
But while Gwinnett's team is growing, Athens is shrinking.
Currently we were up to 3 and now we're back down to 1. We have a hard time finding the clinical side of our teams.
A problem across Georgia, as clinicians from the 23 community service boards are already stretched thin, each covering several of Georgia's 159 counties. Both Athens and Gwinnett say it takes a community effort to make a successful program.
The ones that are truly successful are the ones that have everybody on board. They've got their police, they've got their jail, they've got their courts, they've got their local community service providers. Everybody's on board with making it better.
On top of the shortage of clinicians, the biggest point we've heard from police chiefs and sheriffs is that the co-responder law provides no funding. Central Georgia lawmakers say this may be something that's considered next legislative session. For 13 Investigates, I'm Ashlyn Webb.